I'm Ken Frese, the transition pastor at Palisades Lutheran Church, an outpost of hope in Los Angeles, California. One of my favorite stories is an old Chinese folk tale about a poor farmer who worked his small plot of land with the help only of an old horse and his son. After years of working with the horse was growing older and tired. Finally, in a great gesture of generosity, the farmer just let him go, let him spend his last days, however long he had left, out in the forest with other wild animals, just to enjoy the last time of his life. Well, when the farmer's neighbors heard about this, they gathered around the farmer and said, "What bad news! Now all the heavy work will have to be done by only you and your son. You don't have a horse to do it." And the farmer said, "Bad news? Good news? Who's to say?" Well, a week or so later, after the horse was let go, guess who would return to the farm? The horse came back. And he didn't come back alone, he came back with a whole group of other wild horses. Immediately, the farmer and his son corralled all the horses, and when they heard about it, the farmer's neighbors came to him and said, "What good news! Now you not only have your horse back, but you have a whole other group of horses to help you with your work on the farm." And the farmer said, "Good news? Bad news? Who knows?" Well, after a little while, the farmer's son decided that it was time to tame some of the wild horses. So he got on one of them and started riding it, tried to train it and everything. But what should happen but the horse threw him on the ground and he broke his leg. He couldn't work on the farm anymore. And when the farmer's neighbors heard about this, they came over and they said, "What bad news? Now your son can't help you. You have to do all the work yourself." And the farmer said, "Bad news? Good news? Who's to say?" Well, a couple of months went by, and the army of the emperor came through that area. War had been declared, and so the army was conscripting all able-bodied young men to come and fight. When they came to the farmer's village, they conscripted all the other young men in the village, but the farmer's son they left alone because he had a broken leg. He didn't have to go off to war. Well, the farmer's neighbors heard about this, and they said, "What good news! Your son doesn't have to go off to war. His life has been spared." The farmer said, "Good news? Bad news? Who knows?" I'm reminded of that story because I think a lot of us are saying, is there going to be any good news that's going to come out of this terrible pandemic we've been living through? We ride this roller coaster of trying to hear good news, and then we get bad news, and we go back and forth and back and forth. I think we're probably all wondering, will there be a new sense of good news coming out of this whole episode? Will we have a renewed sense of community and empathy as a country, as a society, as a world? Or will we continue social distancing with increased fear and distrust of one another? Will we have a new sense of resiliency? We got through this. We can tackle other issues as well. Or will we have a greater sense of anxiety? Wow, what is the next crisis that's going to come our way? Will we be able to bounce back economically and have a new prosperity that's going to be shared with everyone? Or will we all sink lower and lower into a new form of poverty? Experts have given us ideas on both sides of the equation. But I, as a Christian, I believe all of us Christians, are always hopeful, because we will always see that God is somehow at work in our lives. We've just lived through Holy Week not that long ago, and what we experienced during Holy Week is we saw Jesus experience being betrayed by one of his closest friends, denied by another close friend. He experienced the violence of a terrible flogging, torture, and a cruel death. But out of that came Easter Sunday. God raised Jesus up to new life, to bring new hope and new joy to everyone, a greater sense of our being forgiven so that we can forgive others, and a deeper experience of human community. Because of Jesus Christ, his life, death, and resurrection, we are always hopeful, no matter how much bad news we may be experiencing. And that's what we as a Christian congregation and all groups of Christians are committed to working for, a greater sense of community, greater resilience, and greater prosperity that we can share with others because of our faith in Christ. There's an old expression that's been around in Western civilization, at any rate for many centuries, about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, or the Apocalypse mentions 4 horses that wreak havoc with the world. They're usually identified with pestilence, that is plague, like the coronavirus, famine, war, and death. It's very interesting that we sometimes feel that we've escaped from all of these, and the coronavirus is reminding us that at least one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse has been with us now for many weeks. But in the midst of that terrible scene of these four horsemen just wreaking havoc in the world, the Apostle John writes, "Grace to you and peace from him who is, who was, who is, and who is to come." Through it all, God is with us. He is the one who was, who is, and who is to come. As the writer of the Hebrews would say, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, with his encouragement, his love, his power, his strength, his forgiveness. And I hope and pray that you will join with me and all Christians and all people of faith to know that we can be hopeful in our situation because of God's presence and God's love in our lives. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and stay hopeful.